October 30th, 2019. One day away from Halloween. It's Hallows Eve, Spags. How we doing?
I think it's actually Devil's Night, if I'm remembering The Crow correctly, that movie from the 90s. So watch out, protect your girlfriend, and also protect Brandon Lee, the Bruce Lee's son, who got shot by a blank on that movie. A little depressing way to start the show, but that always blew my mind when I was a little kid. Like, he just died on set because they like put a correct gun or a real gun instead of a prop gun.
Crazy.
Downer way to go. Downer way to go.
Did you participate in Mischief Night as a kid?
No, when I was a little kid, I was so not mischievous that and then I hit puberty and then I went off the rails, but I was never like a destructive kid. I could see you TPing a house though.
Oh, dude, total asshole. Not you, me. I mean, we, Mischief Night was like the best night of the year. And, one time actually we were going around on Mischief Night and we decided we'd pool hop as well. Pretty cold, but the neighborhood pool, hopped over the fence. And an unmarked car. It's me and three of my buddies, and like 3 or 4 girls were with us, and we're in high school. And an unmarked car pulls up, and he says, stop, police. So naturally, we ran. And because we didn't know what was going on, about 30 minutes later, the entire police force was in our neighborhood searching for us. Turns out that someone in the neighborhood had robbed an apartment, and they thought it was us. Mind you, we were like 16 years old. We had done nothing of the sort. We were, mischievous, but nothing like bad.
Not that mischievous.
Right, of course. The wonderful part is, though, they never found us.
Wow. Also, Brandon Lee. There's somebody named Brandon Lee in the chat who is not dead, but good job, Brandon. But no, that. So you were on the run from the lamb at 16. That's here. I mean, if you have girls there, it's probably getting some Bonnie and Clyde energy in the air, which I would think is a positive for your Halloween activities as a teenager.
Yeah, I must admit, 2 of them ran one way and got caught. And they ratted us out, too. They gave our names out and everything. Still never caught us. The big thing was the police went to my buddy's parents' house, and we felt the wrath of God from his mom. So probably would have rather been caught by the police.
Snitches get stitches. Those guys were not good. I hope you're not friends with them anymore because that's a bitch move.
Never talk to them again. All right, let's jump into it, man. We've got only 10 games on this main slate for NFL this week. Got a bunch of buys. Of course, your Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night games, which have all been just dreadful. But ownership is out. And, the first thing that jumped off the page to me, as we always say, this is subject to change. Ownership will change throughout the week. It always does. But one thing that jumped off the page was right now, looking at ownership, Christian McCaffrey on DraftKings is projected at 30%. You have to scroll to get to Dalvin Cook at 13%. Now, Christian McCaffrey, clearly the best, most electric fantasy producer in the game, hands down. But man, Dalvin Cook going up against a bottom-ranked Kansas City run defense, also a team that won't have patch or likely. Is Mahomes rolled out already?
I think it's still questionable because there actually isn't a line on the game yet because I think they're waiting for a status. I actually missed writing up the game in the slant and go this week because the site I pull from just gives me Vegas odds, but it doesn't have odds if there isn't a line. Right. So I just didn't write up the game, and some guy was like, "You didn't write up this game." I was like, "That seems like an important one. I probably should have caught," but that's life in the fast lane.
Yeah, it says right now that he has a very good chance, a very realistic shot of playing in the team's Week 10 game against the Titans. So for now, we'll assume that he's out this week. It should be just a wonderful spot for Dalvin Cook to run roughshod over this Kansas City defense that, according to Football Outsiders, ranks 30th in run defense DVOA. Pro Football Focus also has them towards the bottom in run defense. What are your thoughts on this massive disparity out of the gate in ownership between Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook?
It's not that much of a discount for Dalvin, which I think is one thing that's, could kind of decide that factor. That and probably not having a total. I feel like for the way we run ownership projections, I could see that being the reasons why it's such a big discrepancy. I think it's mentally too. There's a bit of a barrier to pay for Dalvin Cook, knowing that you have Madison in there, knowing that you have the pass game as well. I could see people maybe thinking like, okay, there's options for Minnesota to score there. Whereas, how else is Carolina scoring besides McCaffrey over this entire season? They're really not even using DJ Moore. Curtis Samuel and Moore get some deep shots, but those guys really aren't highly explosive weapons are going to take things off the table for McCaffrey. So I get it, but like these are steep prices to pay for both these guys. And I also don't want to pay for Chris Carson at his price point. He's going to be very popular, which I'm sure we'll talk about momentarily. I don't know, man. Like this running back slate looks real tough where I don't want to pay 10K for Chalk McCaffrey, but I don't see how you don't.
It's tough. Look, 9,500 is a lot for Dalvin Cook too, but man, I really like him in this spot. And like, let's say McCaffrey comes in at 30% or so at that price. You're right. Dalvin Cook isn't a huge discount, but if he comes in at like near a third of the ownership in this spot, I'm definitely going to have quite a bit of interest in him. Talking about Chris Carson, who you just referenced, right now he's got 29.3 projected ownership, $7,200 on DraftKings. Carson coming off a fine game, but really not what we needed. Still had 20 plus carries for the 5th straight week though, and got in the end zone for the 3rd time this season. Actually, he has 5 touchdowns if you include his 2 receiving scores. But yeah, he's coming in at a lot of ownership. To me, this is tough because Tampa Bay's run defense has actually been remarkably good this season, the best in the league according to most metrics. I know it's a run-first team in Seattle, but it is a difficult spot if you're paying up for Chris Carson because you're not getting him at any bit of a discount.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing that jumps out to Tampa Bay, we talked about this a little bit last week, but blitzing 48% of the time, so they're clogging up a lot of the lanes by setting guys in there. Maybe Seattle can game plan around that, try to get Carson to the outside more than they normally do. But I don't really want to pay for Chris Carson. Like I get the discount. I think if we are talking about paying up, like I could see paying up for the Cook and McCaffrey duo just to get away from that Chris Carson chalk because he's a fine player, but he's like we saw last week, like our own Josh Engelman saw last week on the Live Before Lock show on Sundays. We do the 100 yards on a TD pick, and Josh is yet to get one on the year, and Chris Carson did not help him out, getting to 90 TD. He had 80 in the 3rd quarter and then just stopped because Pete Carroll didn't want to run up the score on his old defensive coordinator, it seemed like. But yeah, I like Carson. I think he's a fine player, but he's not in those other guys' tier, and could be a spot where paying up to be contrarian at both positions may be the move, and then I don't know what you're playing at wide receiver then, but yeah, I'd rather go down to Josh Jacobs than Carson, honestly.
Okay, let's talk about it. Josh Jacobs against Detroit, 6,500, not 65 over under. I could see why you'd really like Jacobs if that was the case. But look, Jacobs is going to get a lot of volume as long as the game stays relatively close. We've seen that each and every week where they've been competitive. Last week, 15 carries. It wasn't crazy, and they did have the lead, but he's definitely a candidate to get 20-plus touches once again. And right now, the over-under on this game sits at 50.5, Spags. So 26.3 implied total for the Raiders, 24.3 for Detroit. But yeah, one of the highest over-unders on this slate, and you've got a Raiders team now that's tied for the. Well, actually, that game isn't on the slate. So tied for the 2nd highest implied total of any of the 20 teams going on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, kind of a shocker they would be a 2-point favorite over Detroit. I would have thought, based on what we see from Detroit this year, how explosive they've been in pretty much every spot. Still Matthew Stafford, we talked about a little bit earlier in the year, but throwing the ball deep downfield as much as anybody, more than anybody in the league. Over 7 attempts on the dot of 20-plus yards targets per game. But Oakland, they do a good job. They squeeze the air out of the ball. 31-minute time possession for them. That's kind of their MO. It's how they keep their defense remotely viable because that defense isn't good. Detroit's defense also not that good, giving up a lot of plays per game, which is something where the Giants almost took advantage of that last week. They were so close to kind of getting there as a higher upside stack. Only Darius Slayton had the upside, really. But 70 plays per game, Detroit's given up. So that's a lot of time for Oakland to be, doing what they do, running the ball down throats, throwing it to Waller, throwing it to Tyrell Williams. And I think the Detroit defense really isn't that good. So this, to me, is one of the most appealing game stacks of the week. And I could see there being value for Jacobs and Carr and the receiving game as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good spot here. And priced up a little bit from where he's been, but it's not a good run defense for Detroit. The big thing, though, like you said, they're 2-point dogs on the road. Oakland right now I'm really surprised by that total, but I'll take it all day long. We'll get into the pass catchers there, especially now that Tyrell Williams is back in the mix. And he returned last week with another touchdown, meaning in the 5 games he's played, he has 5 touchdowns, a touchdown in each. Pretty incredible. But let's stick with running backs for a moment. Le'Veon Bell, here's the big one. Last week A lot of people were on Todd Gurley. Hey, this is a good bounce back spot for Gurley. It turns out that he really just, not only is he not the player that he was before, but that offensive line has not done him many favors either. Let's talk about Le'Veon Bell, who, I've been preaching that his upcoming schedule is really, really, really good. Supposedly starting with Jacksonville, and it was his worst game of the season. Also, rumors that the Jets were looking to trade him, couldn't come to terms with anybody. But here we have him against the Miami Dolphins. You're simply not going to get a spot better than this. The Dolphins, on one hand, have a chance to get their first win of the season. The Jets, on the other hand, have a chance to make Darnold look like a semi-competent quarterback. Only a 41 over-under here, but we've seen Levy. It doesn't matter as much for running backs as long as we like what we're seeing in terms of the projected game script. The question I have for you, though, is with the Jets having a 22 implied total on the road, 19 for the Dolphins at home, are you willing to pay that increase, a steep increase in price point for Le'Veon Bell, or does it not make sense to you?
I get it. I mean, it's very smart pricing this week by DraftKings. I mean, there really aren't any dumb prices like Le'Veon Bell. If he were at 6K, I think would be the chalk of the week by
No
far.
question,
And even that,
he's already
almost
projected for 20% ownership on DraftKings.
Yeah, and that's with that price up quite a bit to where Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette have been over the last few weeks. So it's sort of, I mean, it seems like the pricing has taken a real adjustment to reflect where the volume is expected to be rather than where it's been. And, Bell had his worst game. I pointed out in my column yesterday, his worst game since the 2016 playoffs was what he had last week.
Wow.
In terms of fantasy production and overall production. You got to assume that bounces back. I would think the fact that he didn't get traded, I think, you want to feed him now because you are paying him an ass load of money that you want to keep him happy for at least the interim period. And this is a spot to get going. I mean, we saw James Conner go nuts. I think you could have seen really anybody go nuts in that spot for the Steelers. Better offensive line than the Jets have, but I really think this is a get well spot for the Jets, and I like this spot for Bell quite a bit. And I'd be willing to go there. Very uncomfortable to pay for him given what we've seen from him, but when things are going well, I think the touches should be there, and one would hope that. How can they not go well against Miami? I think it's a bigger question.
So you would be willing to pay up for him, just to be clear here.
Yeah, I think he's one of the better plays. I mean, like, again, if we're going to use Chris Carson as the kind of the temperature, the thermometer of it all, I'd rather go to Bell than Carson too. Like, I think Carson to me is just, I really don't trust him in that spot versus Tampa Bay. Maybe that would make him a better contrarian play. But as a chalk play, I'd rather go to chalky Bell in the spot where it's like, I don't see how he doesn't have a 20-point day. Whereas Carson, I could see how he has that 15-point day where you're like, all right, well, this isn't doing much for me.
Sure. Yeah. And look, 31st ranked run defense, according to DVOA. They're allowing a ton of yards per game. And we've seen that be the case outside of the Cincinnati Bengals, who even Gurley couldn't get it going against them. They didn't need to because Cooper Kupp did the bulk of the work there. But 160.4 yards per game on the ground. That's second worst in the league. 4.8 yards per carry. But another big thing here is, even if they weren't allowing insane, like astronomical efficiency, it'd be crazy if Adam Gase didn't go to Le'Veon Bell very early and very often here. Whether he features him out of the backfield as a pass catcher is one thing, but given Sam Darnold's struggles over the past couple of weeks, which have been, magnified by some of, primetime television and such, but given those struggles, and they are real, why would you not do everything you could to see if Le'Veon Bell can shoulder this load and let your defense do what they've done, which is actually not be terrible?
Yeah, and this is really the stretch where people have talked about. I know in some of the season-long podcasts I listen to, I think Christopher Harris in particular, with Sam Darnold was saying, like, look, he's not going to be good right now, or maybe he thought he would have a bounce-back week versus Jacksonville too. And I think he was a little better, still had some mistakes, but at least got going a little bit in that game. And now his stretch coming up, he's got the Dolphins this week. He's got the Giants next week, Redskins, Raiders, Bengals, then the Dolphins again. So this is a spot where the Jets offense can find a groove here down the stretch. Maybe, I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs, but maybe they can have one of those late season runs where it's like, oh, they're a fringe wild card contender. Like, I think that's not out of range here. And Gase clearly needs to get some wins on the board, even though they were going to trade all their guys. We're going to trade Adams, the safety. They're going to trade Bell potentially. They were looking at trading Robbie Anderson. Like, they were trying to sell a lot of these pieces, but now they're not selling them. So I think you got to load up and try to get these guys going. And they have a really good stretch here to get Bell, get him hot down the stretch, and it increases trade value at least for the offseason.
Truly brutal trade deadline, by the way.
Yeah, nothing really. A lot of talk and a lot of rumors and innuendos about things, and nothing happens. But that's always been the NFL. I think we've gotten kind of spoiled by the fact that more guys have moved recently.
Yeah, and the NBA, we've seen some wild trades over the past couple of years. It certainly gets your hopes up for every other sport. Still sticking with the running backs here, another one that definitely jumped off the board. Nick Chubb, 25.6% projected ownership. I was very high on Nick Chubb last week against the Patriots, especially given that he was supposed to get limited ownership. He lost 2 fumbles in the first quarter, so that sucked. He didn't score, but once again, he is just breaking off incredible chunk plays every time. And his yards after contact, if you watch it, I tweeted it the other day, like Nick Chubb after contact has been ridiculous. He's averaging his last 4 games, 6.6 yards per attempt, 6.1, 5.4, 8.3 against Baltimore, San Francisco, Seattle, and New England. That's nothing to sneeze at, man. These are some teams that rank pretty respectably in run defense this year. So I get why he's going to be up there in terms of getting some ownership, but does he, like, where does he come into the picture when you're comparing him to, say, Chris Carson, when you're comparing him to Le'Veon Bell at a similar price point, knowing that, look, he's got the Denver Broncos, a respectable run D. Actually, Pro Football Focus has them 3rd best in run defense grade, but also an offense that if they don't just get it to Nick Chubb consistently, 20 plus carries a game, he's seen 20 plus carries in 4 of his last 5. It certainly seems like they don't have a chance to win games.
Yeah, I mean, that play that you mentioned, or the second fumble he had versus New England where he broke it downfield, then got it punched out at the last minute, that was kind of heartbreaking for him. But I mean, the talent's there. You're right, 3.7 yards after carry, or yards after contact, rather, on the year, which is one of the better numbers in the league, like in the same tier as Leonard Fournette, a guy we've talked about ad nauseum on these shows, who's not on the slate this week. So we've got that going for us. But I think Chubb's just a good player. And I think the spot, too, now that we know we have Brandon Allen on the other side, you would think that it's going to be a very conservative game on both sides, and it's going to lend itself more to Chubb. Denver's defense is really good. I think that does give you some pause, but I think it's tough. But I think I would also go Chubb over Carson too, because I just think it's going to be a better game script for him where he's going to be in the mix. Carson, you could see him being ineffective, and then maybe they have to get the ball to the receivers a little bit more on the outside, or maybe Carson could be useful in the pass game. I think maybe that's something that I'm not considering enough, though. Tampa Bay does also defend pass catching running backs pretty well. A 46% drop in DVOA to running backs for pass catching. So that's not great for Chris Carson either. So yeah, I think it's Chubb for me. I think Carson really is going to be the dude who just drops down the rankings for me with all this stuff. And I do wonder if his ownership will kind of follow, because we have him pretty high right now. And I like all these guys that we've talked about, to me, look more appealing. And I think you're probably on the same page.
Oh, I'm absolutely on the same page. No question. And again, like, we could talk about McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook, but that's a little bit different than this. By the way, Miami ranks 32nd in DVOA against pass catching running backs this year. I don't know. You may have mentioned it and I missed it, but this is a really good spot for Le'Veon Bell. I've been fooled by Bell this season. I'm perfectly willing to admit that, right? But if you can't get right here, it's probably time to call it quits. And it's funny because I said the same thing about Joe Mixon the other week, and then as we call it quits, he ends up having a decent game. So look, football's fickle. There's so much parity in this sport that you never know exactly what's going to happen. But I'm with you. I think Bell and Chubb over Chris Carson. I don't want to say it feels easy, because there's a good chance that the Seahawks do dominate this game in terms of time of possession. But yeah, I think those two guys I would put ahead of him. The only thing is that Carson almost certainly has more touchdown equity in this particular spot than either Bell or Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take too. And I guess it probably helps that I wasn't burned by that Le'Veon Bell chalk week a couple weeks ago, because I just didn't get there. But you mentioned
I was under the field, but I still had enough to where I felt it a little bit.
Yeah, so like I just wasn't there at all. I was like, I don't get this. I got the price point thing, but I think it might have been the same week or the week before, the week after that Mixon had his price point, and I took that rat trap before it ended up actually paying off. So I think for me, like I'm just going in with fairly clear eyes on Bell, and I just don't see, especially after watching that game on Monday, like how Connor got literally everything he wanted. I mean, I don't think Connor is a bad back by any stretch. I think he's actually a pretty good one, but he's not as talented as Bell, and I think that's, if you're going to weigh those two things. And, even with the crappy Jets offensive line, I just think it's a really nice spot for Bell. Yeah, Carson's opportunity is pretty static. I mean, he's getting the end zone, getting the red zone rushes, getting 3 red zone rushes a game, getting 0.5 rushes within the 5-yard line per game, which is something I'm starting to look at a little bit more because it does kind of, not all rushes in the red zone are created equal, and some of these guys don't quite get as many looks. But yeah, I think Carson's, he's got the floor. I think the question is the ceiling, and there's so many guys who I see a much bigger ceiling for.
Okay. And I'm with you. Aaron Jones is one more. He's projected right now. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running, but he's number 5 in running back ownership right now, just shy of 18%. Coming off a monster game. Aaron Jones now has 2 games with 44 plus DraftKings points this season, Spags. It's insane.
One of them against the Cowboys, so that was great.
One of them equally insane is the fact that he's not even really like the clear-cut feature back on this team. Across the course of the season, he's definitely going to get more work than Jamal Williams, but so it's basketball season. But Jamal Williams is involved, and look, he even had a receiving touchdown last time out. Matter of fact, Williams has 3 straight weeks with a receiving touchdown. Get that. It's crazy. But these guys are being used in the passing game under LaFleur more than we've ever seen. They're finally like getting a consistent ground game too. Aaron Jones is, in my opinion, a pretty up and down option given the fact that he does share the backfield and those big explosive plays can go to Williams and not him. But the ceiling alone puts him on the table as a decent option. What do you make of him against the Chargers here, assuming his ownership stays up above 15%?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that really Rodgers doesn't seem to want to throw the ball to the receivers. And I think we also kind of saw a couple of weeks ago where that game where Scantling went out with an injury, but also they didn't bring him back in, even though they could have brought him back in. Adams went out that game as well, or wasn't in that game. Allison wasn't looking great. The Allen Lazard game was one I'm thinking of in particular. But I think last week too versus Kansas City, they really didn't even target the receivers that much. These guys ran less than 30 routes in that game. And we saw a lot of the work, as you mentioned, going to Aaron Jones, going to Jamal Williams. It does seem like if Devontae Adams is going to be out, like that's going to be the approach. And they're, again, going against the Chargers team, 41% DVOA boost to pass catching running backs. So that does set up well again for another game. I mean, if you told me Aaron Jones is going to have 180 receiving yards last week, like I would have been, that's bizarre to me. That doesn't seem like a logical approach going against Kansas City, but that was how he got there. And I really, it's hard to look away from these guys given that they're getting that workload. If Adams is in, I think that changes the equation a bit because you have to throw the ball to him too. Like you don't have to just go to Jones and Williams, but I think they clearly don't trust MVS. They don't trust Allison. Maybe that changes, but I don't think these receivers are somebody that Rodgers wants to throw to. And the running backs are clearly dynamic enough. They're getting targeted down the seams. They're getting targeted everywhere where like normally those would be receiver routes.
No, it's a very good point. I mean, let's put it in context too. 11 targets for Jones and Williams last week. The wide receivers saw only 13 total targets. I mean, the receivers saw 14 total targets in week 7. The running backs in this game saw 11. So, I mean, man, that's not what you're looking to see when you're rostering guys from this receiver core. Without Devontae Adams, you're absolutely right. He's not looking to anybody's way more than, 4 or 5 times a game right now. And they've found ways to massively exploit defenses out of the backfield with these running backs. I hate relying on running backs for pass catching, but especially, you would think, right? Especially someone like Aaron Jones. But, if I told you before the season started, like, hey, man, I love Jones for his pass catching ability. That's where he's going to do a ton of damage this year. You'd be like, yeah, okay, Laffy. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Roll your eyes at me. But it's been the case. And now he has, get this, 7 or more targets in 4 of his last 5 games.
Wow. That's actually a pretty crazy stat. I didn't realize it was quite that much. It felt like it watching the games as I have, but yeah, man, like I just think it's sort of fits the profile we've learned from Matt LaFleur as he gets the credit of being like, oh, he's a McVay disciple. He's going to be progressive offense. And he has been creative in the sets they're running. He's running really conservative stuff where he's not wanting to throw. Like they recognize when stuff's not working, they cut it out right away. And it's like, I think they recognize throwing to MBS, throwing to Geronimo Allison, not the highest likelihood approaches. Whereas if you're throwing to Jones, if you're throwing to Jamal Williams, these guys are getting you results every time. And then they still have the big upside and for some of the deep plays and all that. So I think it's still a nice spot to keep going there. And And the volume, I mean, you mentioned it, that 4 out of 5 games over 7 targets, that's sustainable. Like that's enough of a sample size where it's clearly a directed effort to get there.
I do want to ask you a little bit too about Derrick Henry for a couple of reasons. Football Outsiders actually has Carolina 32nd in run defense DVOA this season. Pretty incredible, right? But some of it makes sense in that the Panthers are allowing 5 yards per attempt, 135 yards per game on the ground. That's 6th worst in the league. Of course, last week had a lot to do with it, getting absolutely gashed on the ground by Tevin Coleman. But on the season, they have been a run-funneled defense because it's a good secondary, and they do a pretty solid job of limiting passing. They're 3rd in pass defense DVOA. This is the type of team that you could see ceding a lot of work to a lot of production to Derrick Henry, and a Tennessee team with Ryan Tannehill at the helm that says, you know what? Mike Vrabel says, hey, we have a running back that we can give 30 carries a game if need be, and we're facing a Carolina offense that we're not too worried about. Let's just feed Derrick Henry. It does feel like you could see the script move in that direction, no?
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, like we talked about it last week, Ryan Tannehill, we stumbled upon it throughout the course of the show where we were talking about Tannehill as a play and then the things that he does poorly that Tampa Bay should have played into. And that game pissed me off because like Jameis basically turned it over twice in the red zone where Tannehill had a better looking day than he actually had because I was watching that game.
Oh, yeah.
And he was not good. Like he happened to get lucky, happened to get those passes. Jonnu Smith made a nice play on his touchdown as well. Like I don't think Tannehill's a good quarterback, and I think they probably know that. Going against Carolina's secondary, who's been really good, one of the better graded ones from PFF, 81 coverage grade from them. Like that's a very strong number. I think it is a spot to go to Derrick Henry. And you mentioned that Carolina defense, 5 yards per rush allowed, 135 per game. Like I think that's the way you beat them. And to me, this looks like a game where I would want to do that because I don't trust Tannehill going on the road into Carolina too. I'd much rather have the ball in Henry's hands than in Tannehill's.
Me too. I mean, of course, he doesn't have that same pass catching upside, but if there was ever, I'm not projecting this, but when you're talking about ceiling, like if Derrick Henry had 2 or 3 touchdowns and 100 yards, you wouldn't be like, man, no one ever saw that coming. It's definitely something that's in the cards in a spot like this, and a game that I don't think, maybe you disagree, but it doesn't feel like a game, number one, that's going to have a lot of scoring, but also a game that gets out of hand. I mean, I know the Panthers are 4-point favorites, but this run defense has been absolutely exposed. Well, let me ask you, Tennessee's defense. Do you think Tennessee's defense holds up here against Kyle Allen?
Yeah, I think they can hold up against Kyle Allen. Like I think, the thought would be if you wanted to pivot away from McCaffrey for tournaments that you could go to Kyle Allen and what might be his last start. And we did see, Jameis did throw some on Tennessee last week. I mean, Mike Evans in particular, the big day. Godwin did get mostly shut down and bottled up. But I think it's a spot where I do believe that the Tennessee defense is good enough to kind of just keep it a McCaffrey versus Henry game. And if it does break that way where both these guys are just kind of running the ball up and down the field against each other, I think, that's kind of an interesting game stack concept without going to the quarterbacks with just these two guys in there. And Henry's cheaper, even though he doesn't have that pass, because he doesn't have the pass catching upside. So, yeah, I don't hate the thought of that at all. And I think Tennessee's good enough to limit Kyle Allen, limit DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, but probably not limit McCaffrey because nobody can limit McCaffrey, it seems.
Do you see
Besides Tampa Bay, they can.
Yeah, exactly. Tampa Bay is the only one. Do you see any decent value at running back right now, regardless of ownership?
Jordan Howard, a little bit interesting. I think going in, if we are going to see Miles Sanders, I mean, I don't know his status right now. I haven't seen if he's practiced this week, but he did leave that game early last week, and we saw Howard kind of excel there. Want to spin some revenge narratives too. Maybe you could do that. Not a great spot against Chicago. That defense is still good, but from a volume perspective, I could see going to him more. Mark Walton, do you want to go?
I was wondering where you were going to go with Mark Walton.
11% ownership for Mark Walton, so not even that sneaky. But maybe if we are saying that the Jets can keep that, the defense not good enough to run away with that game, maybe that's a spot. But doesn't look like a great value week just at first blush. One guy who I want to talk about in the Beyond the Numbers later, Melvin Gordon, cheap enough where I could see going there, given that we know Green Bay's run defense also kind of bad. Gordon's still getting opportunities, still getting more than Eckler. Chargers not good. That line very much not good, but Gordon's cheap enough where I think he would qualify as value that I wouldn't be terrified of. I don't know how much volume you want, but I wouldn't be terrified of it.
Projected for about 13% ownership. Luke Walton, here we go, dude. I told you this is going to be rough.
He would be an elite running back. Great
I
vision.
Mark Walton is, if you look from last game, right? He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7 carries and 8 total touches in the first half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 carries in the second half. That was against Buffalo. Against Pittsburgh, I knew that was wrong. Against Pittsburgh, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carries in the first quarter, a carry and a look in the second. So you got 8 touches in the first, 8 looks in the first half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 total looks in the second half. So like clearly involved, right? He had some opportunity in the passing game too. So sure, he only had 11 carries. They did fall behind very early in the third quarter. It started getting ugly, or in the second half. But he had 6 targets in this game. So, 17 total looks and 14 total touches against a Jets team that probably won't be able to pull away with the lead. It's not the craziest idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, the risk is that Bailage gets all the goal line work, and that's really all he does. He's not like a guy like Royce Freeman, who's getting the kind of the split mode where he's getting, 50% of the workload, 40% of the workload. So there is some risk for Walton in that respect. But, at that price point, I'm willing to take a few shots, I think, especially with all the people likely to be paying up for some combination of these running backs. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but certainly a flimsy one at best, because Walton, nothing really jumping out. I mean, yards after contact over 3. So that's sort of the benchmark I look to for a guy who's doing enough on his own where I'm like, good for you. You're a good running back. But, is the opportunity going to be there for him if he's not getting the red zone work? He'd have to break one probably. And that's, Mark Walton, I don't know if he's breaking one, but cheap. Hey, he's cheap. That's got that going for him. That's all I can ask.
I just don't know if he's cheap enough is the thing. Hey, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is the sponsor of the NFL Strategy Show. Use the sign-up code AWESOMO and use the link on the NFL tab under the primetime article, totally free article, to get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points. We'll also throw the link in the YouTube chat right now so you can sign up. Get up to $30 in YSRPs when depositing. They're as good as cash to be used on the site to play and win real money. $250,000 NFL baller coming up this week. That's pretty exciting. $25,000 to first. Yahoo's got CSV edits now if you're about that life. They also got the $25K guaranteed baller today, $10 to enter, $5K to first. A lot of good contests there. Also some management free contests if you get in early in the day, which means everything that is paid in by the player gets paid back out to the player. Use the link and use the sign-up code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, to get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points when depositing. They are the sponsor of the Strategy Show. Something else, by the way, Spags, we got a little giveaway, an NBA giveaway happening right now. Win a free NBA Awesemo Plus season pass value of just shy of $400. And
what? 400? What a deal, Waffy.
I know, man. And
how do they get away with this? These sons of bitches, they're stealing from
it is a great question. I've spent years trying to figure that out myself. But all you have to do is look at the pinned tweet at awesemo_com and reply with the player who you think scores the most fantasy points on tonight's 11-game slate. Here's the great part. You could be completely wrong. You could come nowhere close and still have an opportunity to win. So retweet and like the tweet. Reply with the player who you think scores the most fantasy points tonight, and follow Awesemo_com and Awesemo at Awesemo NBA to get a NBA Awesemo Plus season pass, a value of $399. How do they do it? It's like that commercial.
They're literally robbing from our families right now with that deal. But you know what? That's fine. We support it. We just want to, want you guys to be happy as you walk away with a case of Heineken's from our homes and looting us.
Spags and I won't eat tonight, but you have a chance to win a free season-long NBA pass.
I'll be cutting up one single bean for dinner because we're giving this away.
I'll have my ramen. All right. Hey, what do you think when we move the receivers here? What do you think of Godwin and Mike Evans getting like a ton of ownership right now against Seattle in a game where we've got an over-under of, and like I said, this ownership will certainly change, but the highest over-under on the slate, 51.5, 28.8 total for Seahawks, 22.3 for the Bucks. They're 6-point road dogs here, but a 51.5 over-under in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to ignore it. That's a lot of ownership for Godwin and Evans, though, and I get it. We know that Seattle doesn't pressure well, which is going to help out Jameis. Only a 17% rather pressure rate, which is towards the lower end of the league. And Jameis is a guy who does kind of have some issues when he's pressured, can make even more boneheaded mistakes. So he's also like, I think the Jameis thing still, I think it's always worth talking about. He's still not a good quarterback. He's got a 58% completion rate on the year, almost a 5% interception rate, 10% sack rate. These are all bad numbers. These are Mason Rudolph numbers, actually worse than Mason Rudolph numbers. So,
yeah.
But fantasy wise, he gets there and Evans gets targets. And I don't have an issue with these guys, especially assuming that Seattle is going to be able to pass on them. But I could see this being a little bit more of a slog. Seattle doesn't allow, it seems to run a ton of plays. Tampa Bay, a not great pass defense, but also, they do have a decent time of possession overall. So I kind of wonder if this might be a bit of a trap. I get the totals there, another over 50 combined total for these teams. But with this amount of ownership, we talked about the Carson stuff. Like, I do kind of wonder if maybe this is like a spot where people are chasing here, assuming that we're going to see like, oh, Evans got going last week. This week it's Godwin and Evans, and it's like the time to stack. And that's when Jameis just gives you the fecal matter on a plate and goes, here you go, boy.
Yeah, that's right. Let me ask you, if you want to go into depth a little bit here, what do you make of this Seattle pass defense?
I don't think it's as good as it was in previous years, but still only.
No, it's not the Legion of Boom for sure.
No, but still only a 3% passing TD rate allowed. So they do stiffen up when they have to in the red zone. Still the passing yards per game don't look great, over 270 passing yards per game allowed. But, I think they're still doing enough. They have enough kind of veteran tricks to keep things mostly in pocket. I think we didn't see that game get too out of control last week with Atlanta, even though they have Julio out there. They have Hooper. Granted, they have Matt Schaub at quarterback. We talked about the risk with that situation, but they really didn't get much going through the air until that game was out of hand and Pete Carroll kind of let off with let the dogs kind of get kind of fed. I don't know where I was going with that expression, but it was, I think it's a good enough defense. Like, I think we saw it against Baltimore too. Like, they know how to game plan to at least mitigate the damage well enough. And I think against Jameis, mitigating the damage can be enough to actually make him do damage to himself. And I think that's sort of what would freak me out a little bit in a chalk double Tampa Bay receiver week. Like, that's where you want to be.
Yeah. And there's definitely a lot of, there's a high total in this game, but when you're looking at Tampa Bay's total, it's still lower than the Bills, the Eagles, the Lions, the Packers, the Raiders, the 49ers aren't on the slate, the Seahawks. So there's 6 teams. So it's pretty much in the middle of this slate, tied with the Panthers and the Jaguars. So, those over-unders can be misleading if you're looking at it from both sides. But if you think they're going to be playing from behind, I get that. But I don't know if I love this as a stack. If anything, I like it as, play Seattle, play Russell Wilson, play Tyler Lockett, whether you want to play Metcalf or maybe Jaron Brown has himself a game, and then running it back with a Carson, or I'm sorry, with a Godwin, my God, or Mike Evans. That to me seems to make more sense. I don't know how much I love this Tampa Bay passing offense as a collective.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Like, I think it clearly looks right now like it's going to be one of the most popular stacks of the week. I think I'm more into that Detroit-Oakland one. Like, I think there's some more upside to be had there at less ownership. I mean, Detroit right now looks mostly unowned, and I'd rather be there than a chalky Tampa Bay team, just knowing what they do as chalk and that total, which isn't the best either for them. And, Seattle's is really high. I get it, but I just feels like it feels trappy to me just looking at it, and maybe that'll change as the week goes on. But for right now, like, I don't like seeing a ton of ownership. But even DK Metcalf, he had 2 touchdowns last week, but like 10 receiving yards total. Like, he's a deep ball threat, but he wasn't used like a deep ball threat in that one. I think this game could go south for people, and if it's going to be one of the chalkiest games on the slate, I think it might be a spots coming out of the field. Yeah,
like you said, those 2 touchdowns massively salvaged what would have otherwise been a really disappointing performance. I mean, you're talking 4 fantasy points outside of those 2 touchdowns. It was rough, but will he still get looks? Sure. Metcalf actually, along with Lockett, are projected to be the 3rd and 4th highest owned receivers behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So, that tells you all you need to know about this game. Russell Wilson, is up there as well. And Jameis Winston is also probably going to have himself a decent amount of ownership. Right now, this game certainly feels like it's going to be the highest owned. Wilson projected at 19% ownership, which for a quarterback is very, very high.
Yeah, and also looking at the projections from Osmo, of course, Osmo's projections are the ones that we're running out there for both NFL and NBA this year. So if you go to osmo.com/join, use that promo code NFL Strategy, you get half off your first month because they are his actual projections. I'm looking at him now. He really doesn't have Godwin or Evans projected that well. So they're barely a 2x value, a little bit over 2x. And that's really, that's an okay spot to play a person for a tournament. But as the chalk plays of the week, I really don't. I think that could be people actually eventually looking away from the optimizers if they end up where the field is. And that's it's never a good thing when people are chasing a chalk who just went off last week and the projections for this week aren't that great. So, I would have some real concern playing Tampa Bay. Seattle, I get it. Russ says there aren't a lot of high upside QBs. We have no Watson this week. We don't have Mahomes, or we may not have Mahomes. So I get that part of it, but it feels, the Tampa Bay side in particular feels real dicey. I think the Tampa Bay and the Carson parts are the parts where I'm like, I'm good without that.
A few receivers popping with some ownership right now might surprise you. I'll let you run with it, Spags. Jarvis Landry, 4,500 against Denver. Curtis Samuel, 4,300 against Tennessee. Alshon Jeffrey at 5K against Chicago. That one surprised me. Deshaun Jackson's practicing, by the way. I don't know if he'll be active. And then DJ Moore, around 13%, 4,800. So 2 Carolina receivers, a Cleveland receiver, a Philadelphia Eagles receiver. I mean, sure, the price points are down, but are we cheap enough to finally say, all right, let's roll the dice on some of these guys?
I could see the Curtis Samuel thing because he's actually getting a lot of deep targets overall. I think he had over 10 targets. Let me just pull it up real fast, but I'm pretty sure he had over 10 targets last week. And then 3 of them were deep targets. No, 11 targets, 2 of which were deep targets. Yeah. DJ Moore had 8 targets, 3 of which were deep targets. And that was against, San Francisco, who's really good, but the opportunity was there for them to do something. I mean, I don't know that you expect them to get anything done versus San Francisco, but in this spot versus Tennessee, and we did see how Mike Evans was able to get open downfield. Mike Evans probably better at that than Samuel or Moore, but the opportunity is theoretically there for those guys. So I don't hate that price point. Alshon, if Deshaun's back in there, I think the alert that I saw today was that Doug Peterson is expecting Deshaun to be playing. So I think that takes enough off the table from Alshon. It should open up some room for him to operate, but I don't know that I'll see the volume. And Chicago is still a defense that scares me. So I think the Carolina receivers would be the most interesting cheap guys I would be into. You maybe talk me into Deontay Johnson chasing that, even though I don't like it that much. I do think he is the deep threat for Pittsburgh now. He's kind of safely taken that role from James Washington. But I think the Carolina value at receiver probably looks like the best one, at least from what I'm seeing right now.
I think so. And you talk about DJ Moore. He's averaging 9 targets per game over his last 3. So it's not like he hasn't been involved. As a matter of fact, on the season, he's got 58 targets through 7 games. So it's not like he hasn't been extremely involved. He's averaging 8.3 targets per game. He's got games of, 14, 10, 8, 10, and 9 targets. Take out that game against Arizona where Christian McCaffrey ran all over them and Moore only had 2 targets. He's been very heavily involved. So I do think at this price it makes sense. He was basically only $100 more expensive last week, but in a much more difficult matchup. They are 4-point favorites at home. Christian McCaffrey will, get the lion's share of opportunities, but I do expect DJ Moore to be involved. The other top priced receivers, though, you've got like Kenny Golladay, whose salary has kind of skyrocketed over the past couple of weeks, went from 58 to 64 to 77. Granted, he's been very solid this season. A couple of complete disappearing acts, but aside from that, Kenny Golladay has been very solid. His price is up there a lot, though. The same goes for Stefon Diggs. We know that Adam Thielen returned to practice today, so that price on Diggs seems a little bit prohibitive. We talked about Lockett a bit. Tyreek Hill at 7,400 against Minnesota. Godwin and Lockett and Evans are going to be popular, but there are some very good receivers priced similarly to them. I'll throw Allen Robinson into the mix at 6,800 as well. Do you see any of these guys as viable pivots?
I'm very big on Golladay. I mean, we talked about it last week where I just thought he was due for that bounce back after he saw some unique coverages the week before against Minnesota that opened up things for Marvin Jones on the other side. Now we saw this week kind of the bounce back where then you have to pay more attention to Marvin Jones after he hangs 4 touchdowns on a team. I think going to Galladay this week again, I don't see Oakland doing anything schematically that's going to change things. They're not a team who's going to send that double team to him. You could always see Jones get going. You can always see Amendola. Hawkinson too, I think also not out of play. Oakland very bad versus the tight end according to DVOA, giving up a 23% boost, but they don't defend anything well. So I would, in a spot where a team can't defend anything well, I generally favor Galladay. I think you mentioned Tyreek Hill. I actually think that spot, because of what we saw, that Minnesota covered Galladay and covered Marvin Jones, it could be a really nice Sammy Watkins spot, because I imagine you're going to give Galladay or give Hill the treatment that you gave Galladay if you're Minnesota. We're going to try to send a guy over the top, try to bracket coverage him. Whereas I think Watkins could be seeing Xavier Rhodes on his own, and Rhodes has been not good this year. So I think that's a spot where I do think that could be interesting as well, especially if Mahomes is in there, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I think that Galladay to me is the guy who really jumps out as somebody who I find to be special. Allen Robinson too, I think, is also a guy who's probably not getting enough love, and Trubisky is going to kind of murder his upside some weeks, but going against Philly, we know your Eagles, not great covering the deep ball. They had this bounce back week after all the media attention, all the internal squabbling with the Orlando Scandrick release, and them kind of rallying around Malcolm Jenkins and all that. But I think that was a 1 week thing. I don't know if they fixed that defense, that situation. They made no trades for the secondary. So I think that's
Shameful.
not a good secondary. Yeah, no. How do you not make a move? Like, I don't
Shameful,
get that at all.
Dude, absolutely shameful. I hear you. Look, Galladay, we haven't projected on our Awesemo projections, which, by the way, are free today. Awesemo's NFL projections are free today. So are the Awesemo NBA DFS rankings. So check that out. Awesemo's DFS rankings for basketball today and the Awesemo NFL projections are free today if you want to get a look behind the curtain. But yeah, Galladay projected on this slate for the fifth most fantasy points at his position, but also projected right now for only 5% ownership. I mean, just given how this Oakland secondary has been decimated, I totally see this as a spot where I'm actually willing to pay for Galladay, where I think many won't be willing to do so.
Yeah, I mean, an 8% passing TD rate allowed by Oakland, and that means that teams were scoring pretty easily. Also giving up over 8 yards per pass, 8.3 yards per pass, and a decent air yards per target too. So they're not a team that keeps the ball in front of them. Like some teams that, we could talk about, they have a big completion rate. They're generally keeping the ball in front of them. That is not the case with Oakland. Guys can get behind them. So yeah, I think if there were a week to pay up for Galladay, and if people are afraid of it, same thing we talked about with Dalvin Cook, the opportunity's there. People aren't used to seeing that name with that sticker price next to him. But if they get sticker shock, that's where you can capitalize. And sucks to pay up for guys like Bell and Cook and all those guys, but the performance is there, or the opportunity is there, depending on the situation. And for Galladay, both have been there.
And Allen Robinson, by the way, has seen the eighth most deep targets this season. His reception rate on those is 30.8%, Spags. So certainly isn't good, but much of that is to blame on Mitch Trubisky and not Robinson. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that I had the wrong guy. Robinson's reception rate is 54%, so not bad at all. I was going to say that seems really, really bad for someone that good. I do think Robinson, even at 6,800, is somebody that I'll have quite a bit of interest in. As of now, we're projecting him at, where are we at? 10% ownership. Seems about right, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's, I'm comfortable going a bit above that. He's been one of the most targeted guys overall in the league, getting over 9 targets a game, a 26% target share. You mentioned the deep targets, 1.9 per game of over 20 plus yards, 54% catch rate. The opportunity is pretty good for him in that respect. And, Mitch, always a risk. He's not a good quarterback. It sucks. He seems like he's actually regressing. It's even worse than he looked last year, where last year he had those millionaire maker winning weeks. This year he's not. I really thought he was going to be able to get back on track versus the Chargers last week, or in that spot last week. And he just really didn't take advantage of the matchup in the way you'd want to see. So I think that sucks, but still Allen Robinson keeps getting there. So I don't trust Mitch as a guy I want to stack up, but that doesn't mean that Robinson can't have. He's probably not going to have the day that Diggs had a couple weeks ago, but he's got that kind of upside, I think, if he's getting those deep targets.
Yeah, no question. Talking tight ends, it's not a great slate for tight ends. Zach Ertz is very cheap, but he's got Chicago. And, as we've seen, Dallas Goedert is clearly siphoning off opportunities away from Zach Ertz. There's really no question about it. This isn't to say that Ertz or that Goddard is seeing a ton of opportunities every game. No, still fewer targets than Ertz, but the red zone opportunities are going to Goddard, and that's really concerning. Darren Waller projected for second most ownership behind Ertz. I think that changes. I can't imagine Ertz stays that high. But then George Kittle's not on this slate. It's a Thursday, which sucks because that would be one where like a go-to spot. I mean, where is your go-to spot at tight end?
I'm intrigued by Waller. He's another guy too who's priced up quite a bit, but I think he's a play that I'm curious about this week. I think tight end's gonna be tough this week though. Like if Jonnu Smith is the starter again, if Delaney Walker's out, I could see maybe going there. I mean, honestly, there isn't any tight end spot that I've fallen in love with. I think Hawkinson is a guy who does jump out to me. I talked about that a second ago, but a 23% DVOA boost to tight ends from Oakland. I think it could be a week where he's been less involved, but he still has that big play ability. So I'll probably have some of them in lineups, both with Galladay, without Galladay as the pivot to him. Just scrolling through. Hunter Henry, I assume, might pick up some ownership again, but he's priced out of the gills now. I don't know that that's a spot I'd want to go to. So I think it probably would be pay up for Waller and hope it works out again because he had the down week last week. I think it's probably a good time to go back to him going against a Detroit team who doesn't defend anything well. I think that's kind of the spot where Waller should thrive. And if people aren't going to be, they're going to be owning him quite a bit. Never mind. 20% for him. About 20%. Sure. I think actually might be above that for Waller because he seems safe and all these other guys, I feel like kind of flimsy across the board, or you're just kind of hoping that they have upside they might actually have.
I mean, it feels like a dismal week for tight ends. It really does. Maybe Hunter Henry is going to produce, and he has been very involved in the offense. I mean, take nothing away from him since returning from injury. Hunter Henry's, 9, 8, or 5 targets. That was his first game back. 9, 8, and 6. He's clearly being used, and he's being used efficiently. I love seeing that. But in the same breath, is it worth paying $6K for him when you've got? Is it worth paying $6K for him when you're looking at only a few $100s more for Darren Waller? I don't know, and I think that's one of the things. Let's take a look at the routes run from Hunter Henry. Let's see, in where are we at here? I didn't filter out all the so 120. He's played what, 5 games or 4 games?
I don't know, man. Something like that.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range.
Sorry, 4 games. And the Indy one was his first game of the season before he got injured. So right. He's running 32 routes per game. That's really not bad. And when he does, and he's targeted so heavily in them, he is a red zone threat. I think Hunter Henry in a spot like this is viable. I just don't know if you'd rather go there than to pay up for Darren Waller. I'll also point out, though, that Henry does have 4 red zone targets in his last 3 games. We know he's going to get looks there. But yeah, I don't know if it's worth going there over Waller unless you're really trying to get away from that ownership, which could be the play.
I mean, like Ertz, you can make the argument just because he's cheap enough where, he's still getting the target workload, and it could be the kind of grinded out spot where you do want to target him a bit more, though I think there is still the same concerns with, we saw him be affected by Deshaun Jackson in that first game where he really didn't get as many looks. And then with Goddard in the mix as well. I mean, I think, though I guess we could see less Goddard if we do see Deshaun in there, because I think that you just can't have all those guys on the field at the same time. I guess looking at the price for Ertz now, that does make him a bit more appealing. But yeah, even like comparing Waller and Henry more, Waller targeted 30% of the time he's running a route. Henry targeted actually kind of low for a tight end. He's only targeted 22%, which is like in line with a lot of the wide receivers, but not really in line with tight ends who get targeted a bit more when they actually are running a route. At least according to Alex, who's told me that in a couple times, and on the contrary. I'd rather pay up for Waller for sure over Henry, looking at it a little bit more. But Ertz at that value price, I would have some. I think his ownership seems pretty fair. And if you want to have some Goddard, I think Goddard just gets less valuable to Deshaun in there because I just assume he's going to be running less routes if Deshaun is available.
Yeah, less 2 tight end sets for sure. All right, so we're almost through on today's show, but you know what that means. It's time to take a look beyond the numbers. You ready to do this, Spags?
Oh, always. I am always ready to go beyond the numbers.
All right, let's do it. Let's go deep beyond the numbers. Christian McCaffrey projects to be the highest owned player in Week 9, despite crossing the 10K barrier on DraftKings. 25.7 touches per game, including 7 targets per contest. Only scored fewer than 30 fantasy points twice this season, both of them against Tampa Bay. Spags threw a little Easter egg in there earlier, alluding to this specific beyond the numbers. Should he be priced this high? And more importantly, should he be owned this high at this price?
I mean, so I actually don't have a great answer to this question because I do think it's one of those things where you got to start building lineups a bit more. I only ran a couple crunches, but I think, I mean, if for cash, I think you're still going there. For tournaments, I do think we've talked about some of these other guys in that cheaper price tier where I think if you're trying to afford the guys like Golladay and Allen Robinson, you are going to have to go down to Le'Veon Bell. You are going to have to go down to Josh Jacobs. Maybe you're going to have to go down to Mark Walton, which, you know, we talked about that. Hold your nose if you're doing that one. But he deserves it. Like, he totally deserves it. He has 50-point upside. He's shown it time and time again. Kyle Allen has really unlocked the best of him, either because of his own weaknesses or whatever. But 10K is a tough price to pay. Like, I'm trying to think, was like Gurley's maybe been that price before? Maybe Kamara once or twice last year, but nobody this year. And I don't know. Like, I don't know that it's worth it. I don't know what the math is on it. That's the thing that kind of throws you for a loop. But if he's going to be chalky at 10K, it just feels like you can go other ways.
I know. I still like Dalvin Cook a lot. I'm holding out hope that ownership on Dalvin Cook is going to stay as low as it is because of Christian McCaffrey. I know it's sketchy, and most people would say, like, wow, how could you just don't fade McCaffrey? Look, you're not wrong, but the only argument I can make here is that Dalvin Cook also has 27 plus fantasy points in all but 2 games this season. 29, 31, 27, 19, 30, 13, 31, 28. I mean, he's been ridiculously good as well.
I mean, you're paying $500 less, but you're losing about 5 points in Osmo's projections, which feels high. So it still feels like, I think that's why you would get pushed towards McCaffrey. But I agree, for tournaments, like, if McCaffrey has an average McCaffrey day and Cook has a great Cook day, and we know that he can go against Kansas City because they're not good versus the run. We've seen guys like Carlos Hyde have good days versus Kansas City. So like Dalvin Cook, who's a battering ram and can catch passes and is really fleet of foot and is one of the more elusive players in the league. Like, he does have a really good ceiling in the spot, but McCaffrey, I think McCaffrey's still the cash game play for sure. But for tournaments, I think going to Cook or just looking around and trying to get cheaper is probably the move.
All right, let's go to number 2 here. Melvin Gordon gets a lot of flack, and his touches per game are down to 15. Despite that and his poor offensive line, they did get Okung back. Gordon sees 2 red zone touches per game, including a second best in the league, 1.3 rushes inside the 5-yard line. Will we see a Melvin Gordon game this year? And could it be this week with his price down against Green Bay's 62 graded run defense, according to Pro Football Focus?
I think this is a nice spot. I mean, we talked about the lack of value at running back. I do think Gordon is one of those guys who you could actually see getting a bigger workload. Green Bay, you know, we've talked about them a couple of weeks. I mean, many weeks, I think now. Their run defense is much worse than their pass defense. And I think that's something that the Chargers can be aware of. You know, the thing is that their run blocking efforts are so poor that they could be bad enough that they can make Green Bay's run defense look better. But I think Gordon's getting the workload. He's getting the first cracks at everything. He hasn't looked too explosive, averaging under 3 yards per attempt, which is definitely not good. You can make an argument Gordon's just due for regression. Maybe he's been kind of working his way into shape. I would like to see more game film on him, or have somebody who's really smart tell me what Melvin Gordon's doing on game film. But I think the opportunity's there, and he's getting those close range touches as well. And I think, you know, we talked about Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen should be a little healthier. These guys can move the ball downfield, and Gordon could just benefit even if he doesn't look that great. So I think Gordon's actually a really intriguing play at his price, and I imagine I'll be at least with the field, if not a bit above it.
All right, last one. And that, look, it's risky, but I do understand where you're coming from. I don't know how much Melvin Gordon I get here, but I think a lot of it also depends on how this game flow goes. Is Melvin Gordon is it going to be a game where Green Bay is, or a neutral game script, or is Green Bay going to get ahead early? I think this game stays pretty competitive. And right now, what's the spread on this? Do you know?
The spread right now is 3 points favoring Green Bay. So that's actually a pretty big road favorite there, but it's going to be Los Angeles too. So that's going to be, you'll get a lot of Green Bay people in attendance. So that's pretty much a home game for them.
I was going to say, yeah, Chargers are on the road, 47 over under. All right. Yeah, no, I see it. I don't know how much I get to it. I worry that Eckler's just too involved, but I can see where you're coming from if that ownership's going to be low. Let's get to the last one here. When pressured, Dwayne Haskins has a 40% sack rate, a 20% interception rate, and a 5 QB rating. Oh my God. While averaging
I love shitty quarterback stats so much. They make me so happy.
That's crazy. While averaging 2.1 yards per pass, he currently may start against the Buffalo defense that blitzes 31% of the time with a strong 19% pass deflection rate. Is Buffalo worth its stiff price if Haskins starts? I'll answer that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the guys don't like paying up for defense, but if Haskins starts, like he might give up. I don't even know. Like he's got to be due for positive regression, but like he has shown nothing. And I've watched him play now, and every time he's been out there, he just looks confused and scared, and he overthrows. He got unlucky too with one of his picks. It bounced off McLaurin's hands, ended up in a pick last week, but he sucks. Like he really does suck in a really appreciable way. And Buffalo's a good defense, even though they did give up some to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a pro. Dwayne Haskins right now is just not a guy who has the ability to be an NFL quarterback, or at least the mental capacity right now. And, could be the coaching and all that too. So I don't want to put all the blame on him, but he's not ready for prime time. If he's starting, I'm playing Buffalo a lot.
He's not ready for like college.
He's not ready for the XFL.
Yeah. Listen, things will turn around. They haven't exactly graced him with the best offense around him, but I guess are they confirmed getting Trent Williams back this week now that the holdout is over?
He is in. I don't know if he'll play because I have to assume he's not in the greatest of shape because he's just a big older dude. So I'm going to assume that it's going to take a week or two for him to get up to snuff. But I would think he would play. But who knows?
Because if it turns out he's been practicing, on his own, which you never know if that actually makes a big difference. Even an unconditioned Trent Williams is probably better than anything they've had, and probably a lot better, even if he's not in tip-top shape.
Well, so here's some solace. Even if Trent Williams is in there, in a clean pocket, Dwayne Haskins he averages 6.6 yards per pass, so that is an improvement. He gives up interceptions on.
You can't get worse than 2.1 yards per pass.
No, hard to get worse than that. Still 11% interception rate in a clean pocket. His accuracy is up to 69% accuracy, so that is an improvement too, but a 46 QB rating in a clean pocket. So Dwayne Haskins still going to give you some upside, even if Trent Williams is the saving grace for that line.
Okay. I like it. Hey, we didn't really touch on quarterbacks much because generally what you see is when we get into the other positions, you can get a better idea of what we're talking about with quarterbacks. I mentioned Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, your two top projected QBs. Let's close it out with this. A few other guys, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Rivers, getting a little bit of ownership here, but most of it's going to Wilson and Jameis and Carr. Stafford feels, I know you mentioned him a little bit. Stafford feels pretty interesting here. What do you make of Josh Allen and Mitchell Trubisky? I'll throw him in there. He's been terrible, but all of those guys below 5%. Anything catch your eye here at all?
I mean, yeah, Stafford is going to be one of my guys this week. He is a pay-up option, though, so he is going to be on the higher price tier. I'll tell you one thing, which I'm going to be doing a little bit of, and it's going to be dirty, and it's not going to be something I'm going to be really happy with, I'm sure, by the end of Sunday. But when he played some Brandon Allen, 4,100 on DK. I don't know what he is. I need to do more research on what he actually is as a player. But a guy who's that cheap, and I just play anybody named Allen at quarterback. That's worked out well for you whenever they make their first couple starts. At least Kyle Allen last year. Not so much this year, but he has had a couple decent days. And Brandon Allen, just 4,100. If he does passably, I think he can have upside. Just throwing it to Sutton, throwing it to Lindsey and Freeman in the flats. Like I think those guys can create enough production for him. And it would be funny just to see Denver's offense be really good just because Joe Flacco isn't in the lineup. I think that just amuses me conceptually. But yeah, I mean, Rodgers, we talked about that too with the running backs. Like he could certainly have another big day there, but I think he's also expensive. So yeah, I think to me, it's probably paying up for Matthew Stafford will be a move. I have a lot of just scanning through fast. Yeah, it's Mitchell. I don't want to play Mitchell. I barely played him, but just the lineups that I had him in were just terrible. Darnold, I can actually see playing. I do like the Darnold, Robbie Anderson stacks. I think I
don't hate that either. And, I'm willing to roster pretty much anyone against Philly. But this team against bad passing teams, you may be like, well, of course, Laffy, they're bad against the pass. They should be better against bad passing teams. But the thing is, they can actually generate a decent amount of pressure. And when it comes to like we saw Josh Allen escape a lot last week from should be sacks. Mitchell Trubisky's not bad with his legs, but he's not going to be able to do it to that extent. And the Philadelphia Eagles, despite that secondary being as bad as it is, they have gotten some reinforcements back, and it has made at least some bit of a difference. I mean, Jalen Mills is better than anything they had before. Avonte Maddox is not special, but he's at least potentially going to be back in the lineup. I think, even Ronald Darby, dude, guy gets beat on double moves all the time, but compared to what they were running out there, he's still an upgrade. So I think it's probably still not a good spot for Mitch Trubisky. And the big thing, one more thing, is if they can't run the ball, and the Eagles' run defense is much better than their pass defense, I think it's going to be really tough for Trubisky to sustain any long drives with his arm.
Yeah, you mentioned the pressure. Philadelphia, despite whatever failings they may have, a 25% pressure rate, which is towards the higher end. So they are getting that pressure in there. And you're right, like Mitchell Trubisky, not a guy you want to see getting pressure. You want him in the cleanest pockets possible. And his line really hasn't been good. It hasn't helped him out much either. So yeah, like Mitchell, I could see having some risk. We do like Allen Robinson. I think Allen Robinson can have that upside, but Mitchell's probably going to disappoint. And Sam Darnold at 1%, I think looks more appealing the more we talk about any of these guys where you can poke a lot of holes in them. Darnold, look, Mason Rudolph we went nuts, and Mason Rudolph is not a good quarterback. I think Sam Darnold is unequivocally a better quarterback, has a worse offensive line, but he's a better quarterback. And I think that's sort of what I'm hoping for with him versus Miami, is that he just really has to air it out to Robbie Anderson a couple times, and then we're talking about a good day there. The check down to Le'Veon Bell and airing it out to Robbie Anderson, and that's Darnold's 4 touchdown day.
And Xavier Howard's hitting the IR.
Oh, is he really? I didn't know that. That's even better, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So.
Lock in Sam Darnold.
Yeah, it's honestly not crazy. It's not.
No, it's not.
I was actually I was hand building some lineups, just seeing what I could come up with, because I'm like, wow, let me see what this looks like if I have McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook in there. How tough is it to make something? And I started with Wilson, and then I moved down to Darnold, and it did make a difference. And look, he's been horrible, but I do think that again, if you can't rebound in this spot, especially with Xavier Howard out, there's no hope for you, big fella. So here's the Spags and me pulling for you against the 32nd ranked pass defense in week 9.
Hopefully he just doesn't kiss any gross girls this week. You stay away from those girls for the Miami game. We don't want to go to who even does the guy David Fales as the backup quarterback.
Yeah. We don't need him getting dirty at any Halloween parties.
Yeah, no. You stay. Don't dress like Nelson Muntz to go to a party, Sam Darnold. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, or Justin Trudeau. All right, let's get out of here. Spag, anything you got for us before we head out?
I agree that Sam Darnold should not wear blackface. Party. I'll go on that limb. I agree that would be a bad move for him.
Or brownface. Or brownface. Trudeau.
Oh, yes, of course.
Trudeau ran the gauntlet. Or is it the gamut, right? It'd be the gamut.
I think everybody else out there, that should be the thing. Just don't do that this week, guys. If you're going to a Halloween party, and play Sam Darnold. Those two things equally. Sam Darnold, Robbie Anderson stacks. Under 2% projected ownership for that. That can't be right. That can't hold.
No way. Wait.
Yeah.
Hold on. Wait. What's Robbie Anderson at?
He's at 5,500 and 1.4%. Both he and Darnold projected for 1.4% right now.
Wow. Okay. Crawford at 3. Crowder at 3. Huh.
Yeah.
Is Herndon going to be back?
I don't know. Ryan Griffin, if we want to talk about crappy tight ends,
yeah, I know, right?
That was bizarre. He was looking fleet of foot out there too, but yeah, Herndon getting that opportunity too. I mean, really anybody who's in that roster going against Miami, I think I'd be curious about. I'm surprised only 22 implied points. I know the Jets suck, but give him 25, give him 24.
Be careful, by the way. There's 2 Ryan Griffins, one of them on Tampa Bay that hasn't played. So be sure that if you do decide to roster one of the Griffins this week, make sure it's the Griffin that isn't on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that would be useful.
Yeah, don't play the quarterback. That's probably not. With how Jameis can do things, maybe Ryan Griffin will see some action.
Griffin ran 33 routes in week 8, dude.
He's running 24 a game. He's got I mean, the target share is not there, 7% for him. But if Herndon were in that spot, I mean, like Herndon would probably have a big year if he hadn't been suspended and hurt all year.
Who ran the most routes at tight end in week 9? If you guess this, I will fly out to you and kiss your feet.
Is it Darren Fells?
No, Tyler Eifert.
Really?
45.
What are they doing? What is like they the 1 week they played Arizona, they ran him out like 12 times.
I know. 45 routes, led all tight ends. He played 60 snaps. So he ran a route on 45 of 60 snaps.
Jesus.
72% snaps, by the way, way higher than anything else we've seen this season. That's something to keep in the back pocket going forward.
Yeah, I think honestly, Cincinnati might. Well, they're playing the Steelers after the bye, right? So that's probably no. The Ravens are playing somebody tough.
All I know is they're on a bye.
Yeah, so like I think next week they play the Ravens for his first start, or one of those two. But Ryan Finley, like just being a competent, like a league average quarterback, I don't know enough about him. I haven't done my dig on him or Brandon Allen. I'll be doing my Ryan Finley and Brandon Allen research sure momentarily. But like he could be a decent play because Cincinnati does have weapons. Dalton just looked like he's like got PTSD back there this year where he just can't. He's just done, I think, with this team, and maybe give him a fresh start next year somewhere. But he should have been traded to the Bears. Like, I don't know how that trade didn't happen.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. As always, check out tomorrow's show with Sal Vetri and myself. Full game-by-game breakdown. Going to hit on each and every one of these, get you prepped even more so for the Week 9 slate. Take us out, Spags.
Yeah, guys, go hit that like button before you go. Of course, go to Yahoo Daily Fantasy right now. Use the promo code OSMO for $30 in YSRPs, Yahoo Sports Reward points. They're just as good as money with your deposits on there. So go check them out. That is one of the better deals you'll find out there. All their no management fee tournaments that help you build your bankroll, which is the most important part for you as a new player or an experienced player. Just take advantage of the deals out there. And also use that promo code NFL Strategy at osmo.com/join to save half off your first month. Got Osmo's projections, the ownership projections, where you can see Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson looking chef's kiss emoji good out in there. So go to osmo.com/join, check those out, and go follow me at Chris Spags. Follow at Lofty_D. So we're putting out so much content for you guys. And check out, I don't know, I got the four corners for NBA coming out. Got the showdown breakdown for tomorrow's game coming out. Friday NFL rankings video powered by Osmo's rankings. So just watch all the stuff. Just sit there mindlessly and watch it until you're slobbering from the face. I think is what our goal is.
That's how a professional does it. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show.
Bye, guys.